Okay, yeah, we're here. We're in front. We are at the we're starting right now with Tissa, the story of the golden calf. Uh, the will maybe the I, I'm I can't really say it's the heart of the book of Shemot, but certainly it's a foundational piece of the book of Shemot. Now, it's always an interesting exercise to do and say, well, what would happen if I took this narrative out of a book? So could you, in theory, excise the story of the Egel Hazahav, the golden calf, from the book of Shemot, and and it would read seamlessly? Would you would you be missing anything in the book of Shemot if you took out the story of the golden calf? Would you wake up one day and say, "There's something missing from this book. There seems to be a story here that needs to be here and it's not here." Gavi's scratching his head. I know that existentially, spiritually, he knows it needs to exist, but he can't figure out narratively what's the hook.
Rabbi, wouldn't it be confusing then when Moses went to plead for
So,
Israel?
okay, all right, so I take out the pleading too. In other words, if
Okay.
you take out the sin and the forgiveness as a single unit, then we're going to be okay, right?
I don't know. It happened. He wrote it down, so how can you take it out?
Well, maybe ask the question differently, right? Every time Moshe Rabbeinu blew his nose, did not make it into the Chumash, right? What about I know you want to bring up the Levies, right? But what about the Levies? I mean, why wouldn't the Levi get the? They did get it. You're asking your question. What about the Bechorot? Well, no, they were never promised the priesthood. You're saying, okay, your question is how come the Bechorot got switched out for the Levim? Okay, fine. All right, maybe. The Talmud really, in a way, asks this question. The Talmud says this question in a very interesting way. Um, it says that the reason that the story of the Egel Azav, the story of the golden calf, is in the Chumash, is pitchon pe lepale tshuva. It is there to let you know that there is a place in the world for people who repent, right? The story of the golden calf could have been the end of the story, as we'll see. That could have been, but this story is part of Shemot because of that, and the appearance of the story is also in the wrong place, right? Fundamentally. Now, some of the commentators are going to say, well, the story took place in between the construction of the Mishkan, so it's in its right place. But where should this story appear? If you were writing the book of Shemot, if a conventional Canadian language arts teacher was critiquing the book of Shemot, where would you put the story of the golden calf? You're right, they're giving a Torah to either in Parshat Yitro, maybe in Parshat Mishpatim, after they said Nas Nishma. What are we doing? It's sandwiching it in between the making of the laver and the report about how much was donated to the Mishkan, right? It doesn't make any sense, right?
You have the instruction, and then you have the construct. It's the golden calf is right in between the two.
And why? Why? Why is this make a good sandwich?
It's the first time that they actually actively participated. It was imposed. Everything was imposed on them before.
So Gavi's going to say there was a silent. It was a weird shul. They listened to the rabbi all the time. Listen, listen, listen. They didn't do anything, and then finally one day they did something. And what did they do? They built a golden calf. It's like a rabbi has a whole bunch of congregants. They never really want to participate in shul. He leads all the services, right? One day, one of the balabatim says, "Rabbi, I want to lead mincha," and he gets up and he says, "Hail Mary, full of grace," right? That's your version of the story, Gavi, right? That's how this is fallen out. So hopefully we'll get a better answer than that before we're finished. One thing I do want to um, to discuss. And unfortunately, they didn't give me the AV thing. So those of you who are in person are getting a little bit less of a rich experience. But anyway, there's a very important statement of the Talmud, which I think you have to you just have to appreciate how profound this is. It says, Luchot v'shivrei luchot munachim ba'aron. Right? What was in the Ark of the Covenant? You have the 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 completed set of tablets that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, the second set, and you also have the broken one.
Oil.
Somebody's got their has got two machines on, and I'm getting an echo, and it's driving me a little nutty.
Okay, that's me. That's me.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here we are. So this, but also it should not be lost on us. Together with the same idea, is when were let's just go through the chronology of the giving of the Torah. I still to this day I have trouble getting so excited about Shavuot. Do you know why I have trouble getting it? Shavuot is the 6th of Sivan, right? And what do we celebrate on Shavuot? The giving of the Torah, right? So maybe Hashem said the first couple of commandments, right? But that was the one, that was the stillborn version, right? You start the 6th of Sivan. Moshe goes 40 days, 40 nights. He comes down, he breaks the tablets on 17th of Tammuz. So that first one, maybe a stillborn is a little bit too aggressive a language, but it is certainly not a successful delivery of the Torah, right? Because at that day, the 17th of Tammuz, 40 days after Shavuot, we have this golden calf incident, right? Then Moshe is going to go back up the mountain again, and he's going to, another 40 days, going to ask for forgiveness. And then the third time, he's going to get that forgiveness. First time, he's got to schlep the luchot up himself, goes up, and then comes back down 40 days later. Anybody know what day of the year that is? What's the date when he returns with the second set of tablets? Yom Kippur, right? So Yom Kippur, it's such a beautiful symmetry to the Jewish calendar because Yom Kippur is the day of forgiveness, right? We had the sin of the golden calf, and on this day, Yom Kippur, when do we get the second set of tablets? We get the second set of tablets on Yom Kippur itself, which is, of course, the holiday which celebrates this concept of atonement. So it's a very, very beautiful sort of cadence, if you will, a symmetry to the Jewish calendar. Now, with that said, this idea, I think it's just, when we think of the Aron Kodesh behind us, when we think of that, we think of, okay, that contains only the perfect Torah. But I think that the beauty of it is that this is such a core Jewish teaching that it also contained the brochel luchot, right? In the holiest place of Judaism, it has evidence of our sin, right? That's I think that there's something truly genius about that because nobody really succeeds without making certain mistakes. I know there are 1,000 sayings like this. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs is a common English expression. But the Talmud has a very interesting expression as well, which says there are 4 people who never sinned. Amram, Binyamin, Amram, Kilav, and I forget the fourth one. Yishai, right? Yishai. And can anyone name any accomplishment of any of those 4? The answer is no, right? So that's the sort of the Talmud's version of the same idea, is that people who are going to do will sin. And in fact, there's a very interesting version of the Midrash that talks about the first day of creation. It counts all of the hours. It tells you, in this hour Adam was put into the garden. In this hour he went to sleep. In this hour Hashem separated Adam and Chava. In this hour he gave them the instruction not to eat from the tree, etc., etc. And then, like the 12th hour, he's forgiven, right? The 10th hour he sinned, the 12th hour he's forgiven. So I saw one Jewish scholar said, Christians might believe in original sin, but Jews believe in original forgiveness. So coming back to the question that I asked, why is the story in the book of Shemot? The answer is it has to be in the book of Shemot. This is maybe one of the most core Jewish teachings ever, because it is this teaching that tells us there's this concept of forgiveness. And in the midst of this concept of forgiveness, what core teaching do we have? we have the 13 attributes of mercy. Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum L'Chanun. Right. This is, if you've been in shul on the Ila, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Habayim, Rav Chesed V'Yemet. So it's Hashem, Hashem, God, God, different attributes of God represented in each of those. Kel Rachum V'Chanun, God who is merciful and gracious. Erech Habayim, slow to anger. Rav Chesed, abundant in kindness. The Emet and truth. Goes through all these different aspects, but this is considered the covenant of forgiveness. Just to give you a very interesting contrast between the first tablets and the covenant of forgiveness. So there is one mitzvah within the 10 commandments that says you will not be forgiven. What is that? Anybody know?
Is it that you'll not be forgiven or not be forgiven for many, many generations?
It says, Lo yinakeh, you will not be cleansed.
Parents.
Not the
Parents.
Parents have to forgive you. Trust me.
Somebody.
Adultery?
Hashem's name. There you go.
Oh, right.
I don't know if God forgives us.
Lo yinakeh, you shall not be cleansed. And in these 13 attributes of faith, right? V'chata v'nakeh, and God will cleanse you. So it's very often pointed out that this covenant of forgiveness is that really Hashem wanted to operate through pure midat hadin, through the strictest aspects of justice. But through this story, we come to a covenant of forgiveness, which has a little bit more of the midat harachmim, the attribute of mercy. So that's a very important concept. So again, I'm just what point am I driving home here? The point I'm driving home here is this story cannot be excised from the Tanakh. Not that we could excise any story, but it is fundamental. It's ultimately fundamental to the way that the Torah operates and the way that it sees humanity. And I'll just go one step further. The truth is that there is a theme within the Torah. Anytime that the Torah introduced something on its first try, it almost always fails. So if you've heard me say this before, I don't mind repeating it because I think it's very fundamental, right? The Garden of Eden, failure. First society, Noah, failure, right? We need a reboot, right? First set of brothers, Cain and Hevel, doesn't work out so well. We need to add another one. We have to have Shet, right? We have the first attempt to go into the land of Israel, the Meraglim, the spies, fails. The first king, Shaul, fails. We have this pattern that runs consistently, even when God is the initiator. And I think that this is a story which the Torah puts there for us to teach us this idea that improvement is really what the Torah is interested in, not the perfection right out of the gate. Okay. All right. So this now. There are 3 different episodes, by the way, where the children of Israel are nearly destroyed, and this sort of works on the same theme, right? One is the golden calf, one is the spies, and one is the story of Korah. And each time Moshe and Aaron intercede on the half of the Bnei Israel to gain forgiveness. This is part of the idea that this story is important because it teaches us some of these concepts of forgiveness. Okay, now I want to try and unpack a little bit of this story of the golden calf. The story of the golden calf begins with Vayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe. They see that Moses is late. It doesn't come down in time. And all of a sudden they panic. And there is a central figure in the middle of this story. Who's the central figure in the middle of the story once they panic? Right, it's Aaron. Right? Aaron is the central figure. And so if Aaron is the central figure, then, and this was a terrible sin, we might expect something interesting to come out of this, right? Now, let's just for a moment pretend that Aaron lived in 2025, and we had the he was an elected leader. He was elected, appointed. He was a leader of some agency, the agency of the Mikdash society, whatever it is. And it was discovered that as the high priest of the Mikdash, he had engaged in an activity that maybe it wasn't idol worship. We'll try and decide whether it was or wasn't idol worship, but it certainly looks a little like idol worship. It smells like idol worship. So how does Aaron get to be high priest? Or at least, how does he get to retain his job as high priest? Right? There's a little bit of a tension here, right? It's the guy who was most, if you had to identify the name of one figure involved in the story of the golden calf, who's your choice? It's Aaron, right? He's the guy who's involved. There's not a lot of other people around to point a finger at. And so here we have this question about how do we understand Aaron's role in this whole particular episode. So that's going to be our first question. Now the second question, I think we maybe in order to try and answer this, we have to sort of try and figure out what was really happening at the base of the mountain. So here I'm going to give you what I think Rosenblatt's theory is a little bit, and then we'll get back to our question. Okay. So the first question we're going to ask is this Egel Hazahav? And I'll tell you my pure belief in the Egel Hazahav, and then we'll try and understand based on the Mefarshim. So there are two different sort of streams of thought in the Mefarshim. One is that this is sort of a mystic replacement for Moshe. Moshe was seen as a person who wasn't quite a physical, or wasn't quite only a physical leader. He was somebody who had a connection to the divine. He had this special spiritual power, and so they're looking for something that has that special spiritual power. So where does this egel come from? Where are you going to get this idea that, okay, maybe the mystic replacement should be an egel?
Well, they've just come out of Egypt, and they saw that the Egyptians, amongst whom they lived, were praying to cattle, if I'm not mistaken. And they thought
that sounds like pure avodah zarah. That sounds like pure idol worship, right? That's not a mystic replacement. That's how I would read it. The picture on the right here, by the way, is a picture of the Apis bull, which is a well-known cult in Egypt.
The ox representing Joseph?
So Gabi wants to say, is the ox representing Joseph? There is some connection there. There is a midrash that says that there was a note that Moses used to put into the Nile to raise the bones of Joseph. It said Alei Shor. And it was that note that Aaron threw into the molten gold, and out popped this golden calf. So there might be some reason to use that particular argument. But the Ramban and others use a very different one, which is interesting.
Are we saying, Rabbi, that the Jews or Aaron didn't fashion the statue into a calf? That's what emerged out of the rivers.
No. You overlap the two metaphors, or the two scenarios. So according to the Midrash, Joseph's bones, when they went to raise Joseph's bones from the Nile, it was buried, sunk. It was an iron casket that sunk to the bottom of the Nile. But Moses is required to redeem Joseph's bones, and so he wrote on a I guess a piece of papyrus, Alei Shor, rise ox, right? And he cast that into the Nile, and the bones of Joseph floated to the top. Now, after that miracle, they retrieved the bones of Joseph. Sitting on top of the bones of Joseph was this note that Moses had written, rise ox, right? Because Joseph is referred to as an ox. Okay, so that's story number one. But take the piece of paper from that story, a piece of paper that, let's say, has some spiritual energy, some divine resonance, And through that note went into the molten gold, right? And now we have the sort of the overlapping oxen, right? So Gavi wanted to say that this was Joseph, right? Because that's maybe the most obvious ox that we could reach for in the story of the Exodus from Egypt. So there is some logic to taking that ox. But that is not what the Ramban understands. The Ramban understands this in a bit of a mystical way. And what's the mystical aspect of this? The mystical aspect of this is that there is on the chariot of Yechezkel, there are a number of different animals, right? There's the eagle, and one of them is the shore. The one on the northern side is the ox. That's one of the four animals of the chariot, right? In the chariot of Yechezkel. Now, remember, the chariot of Yechezkel is meant to represent the divine chariot, the divine presence that is leaving the temple. It is a very difficult chapter to interpret. It is very mystical. It is obviously very representative. It is the kind of mysticism that the Talmud is uncomfortable teaching in public. But nevertheless, there are four animals on the chariot. The northern side of the chariot, which represents, if you will, the aspect of strict justice, according to Ramban. It's because our compass is oriented north, south, east, west. Whenever you look at a map, north is up, right? So we sort of think of everything facing up. In the biblical world, everything faces east. East is Kedem. And I'll tell you how you can remember this, right? With the country where the Houthis are is where? It's in the south, and it's called Yemen. And Yemen means right, the right hand, right? So that means in the ancient Middle East, you always face the rising sun, and Yemen, Yemin, is south, and Tzafon is north, right, is left. Left is this aspect of justice. So I'm giving you all of this background because the Ramban does not want to understand that they're trying to replace God. He's basically saying, this is not a replacement this is not a new God. This is an attempt to actualize some kind of spirituality in the absence of Moses. And so the reason it's a golden calf is because it was sort of this vision of, they crossed the sea. The Talmud says that the lowliest maidservant saw a more clear vision than Yechezkel ben Buzi when they crossed the sea. So they had all seen the chariot. They knew what this looked like. They knew what the gods might look like, and that was an ox. And so they make an ox because they're trying to reconnect to that. Right? That's the Ramban's version of what's going on. And what's interesting also is you sort of have this parallel that Moses is you have Moses as the sort of the spiritual emissary. He's on the mountain, just like the war with Amalek, and you have Aaron and Hur, who are also in that position. And here, so we're sort of trying to recreate that. There's sort of the surrounding positions, and Moses is absent. So we're going to use this calf to sort of represent that spiritual connection. Now, of course, it goes without saying, Jews don't make physical images, right? That's not how we roll. Rav Yaakov Meidan, by the way, is going to say, we're going to give several interpretations. He's going to say they're all correct, and I'll explain how we get there. But so on one end, just in terms of what happened, just summarizing here, Nachmanides says, it wasn't, when they say Elo Elacha Yisrael, it means this is your leader, Israel. This is your connector, Israel. This is not, they're not replacing God. They didn't think they were replacing God. It's a mystical connection based on their vision of the chariot. Rashi says, no. It was grade A idol worship. This was pure, unadulterated idol worship. Now, Rav Meidan says they're both correct. And this is where Rav Meidan rings very true. Rav Meidan says, have you ever seen 600,000 Jews, or 3 million Jews for that matter, all agree on anything? Right? All of them 100% agreement? So it's very possible you had this group of people who were called the Eruv Rav. The Eruv Rav, what were they praying to? They were praying to the Apis bull, right? You had this group of people, they're bringing in the pure Egyptian idol worship, right? They're like, this Moses guy's gone. We need something here to protect us. We're going back to what we know. We know how to do the cult of the Apis bull. We're going to do the cult of the Apis bull. And maybe there were other people who say, that reminds me of the chariot, right? So different people sort of understood it differently, which is entirely possible these days. Okay, very good. So Gabi points out that this reflects the fact that not everybody was killed in the aftermath of this particular tragedy. So that reflects the fact that there were people who were in the inner circle and people who may have been just swept up in a sort of to a lesser extent. So
now I don't know if this is nitpicking, but here where it's called Egel, and in Yechezkel it's called the shore. Is there a different in significance, or just
I think
it's a language?
My knowledge of biblical zoology is not strong enough to know, whether that would work or wouldn't work. And even so, the egel just means it is young, right?
Right.
And so it could be that so that's how they sort of saw it.
Okay.
And how they perceived it, without it necessarily being an essential characteristic. Now, here I want to focus on a couple of psukim. It says, "Vayikach mi Adam." And so Aaron initially tries to dispel them. He initially tries to tell them, "Okay, go to your wives, get golden earrings, get various bracelets and whatnot, and we're going to make a golden calf." It says, "Vayikach mi Adam veyatzar oto b'cheret," and he made it with a cheret. Now, cheret, the interpretations of what a cheret could mean are very, very diverse, and I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to define that. But let's just, for the moment, I want to focus on the fact that he made this. It could be a knife. It could have been from the same root as chartumim, the Egyptian magicians. Vayasu egel masecha. They made a golden calf. Vayomru, and they said, Elo Elohecha Yisrael asher elucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. This is your God Israel, which took you out of Egypt. So I just want to point out one point. Rashi says from the fact they said Elohecha, your God, and not Eloheinu, our God, is indicative of the fact that the Eruv Rav was in there, right? Because why wouldn't, if the Jewish people were speaking and they thought this was their God, they would say Eloheinu. They wouldn't say your God. Who's saying your God? What's yours and not mine? So the idea that they say your God means there must have been two groups in there. That group is the Eruv Rav, the sort of Egyptian hangers-on who went out because they were like back in the winter, right? They're the fair weather fans. Pharaoh's on his way down. This is Israel God seems to be doing good. Let's go out with the Jews. Okay. Vayarai Aaron, and Aaron saw Vayiven Mizbech lefanav, and he built an ark in front of him. Vayikra Aaron, and Aaron declared, Vayomer Chag LaHashem Machar, a holiday for God tomorrow. Now, this looks bad, just between you and me, right? So he's the one who said, okay, holiday tomorrow, right? We're going to dance around. It sounds like he's saying we're going to dance around this calf tomorrow. But you could read it differently. When he says, Chag LaHashem Machar, a holiday to God tomorrow, how else could I interpret that? Okay, delay it, but Chag LaHashem, a holiday to God, using God's formal name, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey.
We're going to do something else.
Right? What's that?
We're going to do something else, something more traditional.
We're worshiping God tomorrow. You guys can have fun with the calf today. Tomorrow, we're worshiping God. Okay. Vayishkimu macharat, they got up in the morning. Vayul aulot, they brought burnt offerings, and they brought peace offerings, and they got up to litzachek. Here is understood as sexual immorality. The word litzachek understood as gilui arayot, as acts of lasciviousness. Now, it's a sort of a funny jump to make, but here's what I would say. One of the things I like to do when I read the Torah, I like to sort of say, okay, we do need the mafarshim, we do need the interpretations. You can't really understand it fully without all of the mafarshim. But there also, I think, should be a level on which it is understood. If you were just reading through this and trying to understand what was going on, where you might be able to, if you will, project yourself into that moment. And so here's my attempt to read ourselves into this story. You can tell me, Rabbi, you're totally crazy. This is not how you would read yourself into the story, but this is how I would read us into the story. You come, and this is how we're gonna get in there ourselves. You come into shul. You yourself are feeling after a moment of feeling great spirituality, thanks to God, whatever is your motivation. You come in, and the rabbi tells you about some new Jewish law. Let's pretend you didn't know you're not supposed to rip the toilet paper on Shabbat. All of a sudden, you come to shul, and the rabbi tells you, okay, one of the 39 malachot is tearing things to size, cutting any bulk material down to usable size. And he says, you have to remember not to rip toilet paper on Shabbat. Now, you might bristle at that. You might say, well, that's ridiculous, right? I want to reject that. Right? Maybe I'm the only person who had in a moment where I was hit with you're asking me to do what, God? You're asking me, there's a simple workaround to this: buy tissues, right? But in the religious experience, especially the Jewish religious experience, there is going to be a moment where you come to the law and you turn and you say, what is it that God is asking me to do? And there's sort of a moment of rejection. I'm going to take that same emotion, go and take it a step further. There is also a certain amount of pressure that you might feel, whether it's in synagogue or whether it's around certain other people, that you might behave a certain way. So let's just say in synagogue, thank God, most people don't use their cell phones, right? Right? Even people who drive to shul. So sometimes people drive to shul, they park a couple blocks away and they walk, right? I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying that's what people do. And I think that there's a certain respect to the synagogue. There are also people who might use their phones on Shabbos, Rahman al-Litzlan. I hope not, but they at least don't use them in shul, right? So if they need to use the phone, they might walk out of shul. There are doctors who need to use the phone. They walk out of shul to use the phone. But there is a certain sense that when the eyes of God perhaps are not watching you, when Moshe Rabbeinu is not there to watch you, that's when the wheels come off. And so here you have this very interesting experience of the Bnei Israel. They came out of Egypt. Essentially, they're living without the discipline of halacha, without the discipline of Jewish law. I know that we can. There are all sorts of midrashim about what they did keep in Egypt, what they didn't keep in Egypt, but certainly the narrative of the book of Shemot tells us that Sham Sam Lo Chok Mishpat. There in Meriva, that's where they got Chok and Mishpat. That's where they got statute and law. Right? We know that at Sinai they're getting the law. Mishpatim, they're getting the law. Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will listen. Right? They are starting to adopt various levels of the law, but here now this is the first moment. They're 40 days. When's the first time that they feel that perhaps either the gaze of Moses and perhaps by extension the gaze of God, the tether to that law is just loosened just that ever so much? The people saw that Moses was tarried, he was late. And that's when it all comes apart. And so there is this this story, if you ask me, is a story about the thin layer between total discipline and anarchy. Right? So that moment when Moses walks away, the golden calf represents the throwback to Egypt. And idol worship throughout the Torah, specifically Canaanite idol worship, but we can maybe put Egyptian idol worship in it. It is associated with the complete lack of a sense of discipline. It is magic without accountability. So the idea that you had all sorts of weird cultic orgiastic behavior that was associated with idol worship manifests in the interpretation of this golden calf and this idea vayakumu letachek. They're like, we can go back to sort of the Egyptian free-for-all kind of a moment. It's sort of the veil of civilization just becomes undone at this one moment. It's true, right? Right, but Moses in this version, Moses doesn't just represent the intermediary, but he's the intermediary who makes he's the giver of the law. He's the one who presents the structure in front of everyone. And so when that link is missing, then everything comes apart. Now, okay, moving to our when linking to this. So again, we're going back to the question of Aaron. How does Aaron come to become the high priest after association with this? So Rav Yaakov Midan has several answers, which I think are not independent answers. The first answer is a very interesting answer, which is like this. The people, the first thing they do is they assassinate Hor, right? He tells them, stop panicking. No, we're not going to make a golden calf. And they kill him. So here, Aaron is in the position of choosing between the discipline of the law and civil war. And so Aaron is going to try and mitigate the whole situation by being Ohev Shalom v'Rodev Shalom. So he's going to use all sorts of different ways to downgrade the purity of the violation. He is going to first try and delay with getting them to, they have to go bring these various, gold pieces. They're going to have to extract them from their wives. And the assumption is that they won't do that. What is very interesting is Maidan points out that if you think that there's not a likelihood of the civil war, then you haven't really read the rest of your Tanakh. Because when you read the rest of the Tanakh, you will discover that you have several episodes where similar things happen. Where does the golden calf remanifest? The golden calf is going to remanifest in the book of, essentially in the book of Malachim, the book of Kings, or the book of Chronicles. The book of Kings and Chronicles both describe the same time period, just slightly different perspectives. The book of Kings is essentially a contemporaneous account by the prophets. Maybe it's the prophet Jeremiah who ultimately puts it together, which is the lessons of Solomon and the kings that follow thereafter. But what happens is after Solomon, you have a split in the kingdom. You have a civil war between Solomon's son, whose name is Rechavam, and the agitator the rebel who is Yeravam ben Nevat. And Yeravam ben Nevat has just been in Egypt, and he comes back and he sets up a golden calf in two places in Israel. One in the north, which is in Beit El, all the way up. You can still see we believe you can still see the altar up in Tel Chai Park, not Tel Chai Park. Yeah, I think it's in Tel Chai, all the way up there in the north. There's a park there, beautiful park, and there's an amazing reconstruction of the altar. And the other one would have been in Beit El, which is being the center of Israel in the middle of Shomron. And basically what Yeram ben Nevat was saying is, I don't want you guys going back to Jerusalem. Jerusalem's going to be a problem for me. It will undermine and he sets up these golden calves. He says, these are your new gods. And he builds a wall in between Judah and Jerusalem. And hundreds of thousands of Jews die in the civil war between the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. And so here you have the golden calf manifesting its second time. And in this time, we don't avert the civil war. The civil war is for real. And so that sort of just gives you an example. Another example of the same is the story of Eliyahu and Har Carmel. Eliyahu does is a whole sort of replay of this story. And again, there's significant bloodshed in the purity of Eliyahu. And so here Aaron his attempt is to avoid that bloodshed, to avoid that. And so that's maybe one element of who Aaron is. And we there are lots of other places to see that, but I just want to, maybe for the sake of getting to the final part of this, I think it's worth seeing the last point. And here I'm going to try and wrap everything up together. Right? I started off by saying this is a story about the story of the golden calf. Is the door is open for the repentant, right? And the tablets and the sherds of tablets sat in the Ark of the Covenant. So if you pick up the book of Vayikra, there's a chumash right there, right? Anybody wants to grab a chumash? Anyone who wants to grab a here? You know what? Actually, I'm going to pull this up here. I'm going to pull up the book of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus is the book that is going to teach us about the various offerings, right? So I'm going to we'll look at this, right? And we're going to see that there is a verb that is perhaps most significantly associated with the various offerings, right? And what is that verb that we're going to see? One second.
What's this verb going to do?
You'll see. I promise. You will see. We'll just get there. But you know what? Here, I have a better, easier way to do it. We're going to go to the section of the book of Vayikra where they deal with the most central moment of the Kohen Gadol, and that will be in Parshat Achremot. Let's see if I can get there.
Can I guess what verb you're looking for?
You certainly can.
Present.
No. Okay. Okay. All right. So here we go. V'ikriv Aaron et parach hatat asher lo, and Aaron will bring the sin offering for himself. V'chiper ba'ado vad beito, and he will atone for himself and for his household, right? And this word v'chiper, right? V'chiper, and here we have the same word again. V'chiper ba'ado uvad beito, right? And he's going to cleanse, to atone for himself and for his entire household. And it's going right. It's going to continue. You're going to continue to see this word lechaper al nafshotechem in many, many, many contexts, right? V'chol adam lo yeh ba'ol hamoed b'vo'o lechaper b'kodesh. No one shall stand in the tent of meeting when Aaron comes in lechaper b'kodesh, right? To atone, to cleanse. So this word, right? v'chiper. You're going to see that over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many times you're going to see this word. You see it also. I think we saw it last week in Parshat Tetzaveh. The role of the Kohen Gadol in the Beit Hamikdash is kapara, is atonement. What better symbol could there be of atonement than to take the person who was the poster child of the Egel Hazav and put him in the center of the ceremony? Right? He is the poster child of kapara. He is the poster child of atonement. And so the idea that we would take Aaron out of this because we're somehow disqualifying him is wrong. The idea is no. Aaron has to stay so that there can be a kapara in the offing here for him. Okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the chat. Let me just see what is nothing. There used to be things in the chat. I guess I solved everybody's questions. Is that the case? Okay. Now, let me just add one other interesting point, right? We talked about where this particular narrative appears, right? We were talking about the fact that this narrative appears it seems out of place. We have the story of the golden calf in the middle of this construction of the Mishkan, right? It's on either side of the construction of the Mishkan. Well, why is it there? Because exactly, this idea of kapara, this idea of atonement, is central to the karbanot. It's central to the entire exercise of what this building is about. And so therefore, in the middle of this, I'm going to give you the most important story. The most important story is that the story of the golden calf and its recovery, right? And the return of that, which brings us also to the fact that at the center of this building, right, the center of this edifice, this institution, this Beit HaMikdash, is going to be the Aron HaKodesh. And what is in the middle of the Aron HaKodesh? We're going to have these two things, tablets and the broken tablets, right? Okay, so Gavi's referring to the fact that there's some ideas that the Makom Shabal Tshuva Omed, right? That a Talmid Chacham cannot even stand in the places where a Baal Tshuva is going to stand. So there's this sense that people stand in a holier position sometimes after the recognition of sin and the recovery thereof than they would have beforehand.
Also, how strong is the bond in sin? It's superficial, or on the more superficial, or it's not strong. So once you have found Yeshua, you actually create a stronger bond. I mean, why do you start? Why in the beginning with? Why do you sin? Or why do you not follow the commandments?
Okay, I mean, I think that you can't always tar that with one single brush, because I think there are people who sin and it pushes them farther away, and there are people who sin, they do real tshuva, sometimes it brings them closer. That's a more complicated question than to just simplify. But I do think that the centrality of teshuvah itself, of the arc of repentance, is very important, and so that's why you have Aaron in the middle. There is also, I think, a unique piece here. Like especially when you take these elements and you superimpose them over each other. That Aaron, we know that Aaron, Pirkei Avot understands Aaron as Ohev Shalom v'Rodef Shalom, right? He's a lover of peace and he runs after peace. That Aaron's sort of approach to everything is to try and be the peacemaker. Now, it's a fascinating piece that that peacemakers can get themselves into trouble, right? There's a shalom and emet, peace and truth, are sometimes at tremendous odds with each other. Right? Any husband who has been asked the question of, does this make me look fat, knows that peace and truth sometimes don't sit in exactly the same place. But and this could be exactly where Aaron got himself into big trouble. His attempt to bring peace to the children of Israel and delay things until Moses gets back and try and smooth things over, and maybe it wasn't so bad, puts him in a very, very difficult situation vis-a-vis truth. But the idea of the Beit HaMikdash, which is the Mishkan, this temple edifice institution, which attempts to bring the Jewish people together and tries to atone for sins. Atonement also, to a certain extent, is a rejection of truth. I'll explain. I'll explain by telling you the story of Jonah. So Jonah is told to go to tell Nineveh to repent, and Jonah refuses, and he tries to run away. Ultimately, he has no choice. God forces him to Nineveh. And Jonah says to God, you're gonna forgive them. And I don't think they're doing such good tshuva. And Jonah takes the same formula that we have here in the Parsha, right? Hashem, Hashem, Kelrachum, Lechan, Erech, Apayim, Rav Chesed, Emet, right? God, you are a God who is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and true. So Jonah doesn't say, he refuses to say true. He says to God, you are nicham al hara, that you are kind to the sinful, as if that itself is a rejection of truth. So I think it's very interesting that Aaron is that figure who pursues truth, is also the figure who himself embodies that recovery process, that these two reasons that Aaron might be able to survive the sin of the golden calf are there. But again, I think everything comes back to the very first idea, is that this story of the golden calf is in the Torah as a pitchon pele ba'alei tshuva, that it is the opening, creates an opening and a concept for repentance. And I guess maybe there's no better proof than the forgiveness of the sin of the golden calf becomes the backbone of the liturgy of penance, right? The prayers that we say in advance of Rosh Hashanah, the slichot, they as their formula, they say those very words, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun, God, you are slow to anger. They're called the 13 attributes of mercy. We use them on Yom Kippur as part of the central liturgy, both in Ma'ariv and in the Ne'ilah. And so this story, again, coming back to the original question, it's not necessary for the narrative of the entire Bible to go forward, but it is necessary for the sort of the essence of the message of Torah and this idea of repentance to move forward. So Adkan, this is 55 minutes on Parsha Shavua. I don't know, are there any questions? No, I left them speechless.